The vast halls of the war-dead catacombs echoed with the clash of steel. Deep cuts, shattering blows, and screams of agony reverberated endlessly through the suffocating heat of battle. To say that dozens stood against her would not be an exaggeration. The translucent corpses of the cursed faded slowly into ash as Nadja fought on, her breath sharp and ragged, her arms trembling but still defiant. As she rolled aside to evade another strike, she seized a fleeting moment, swinging her colossal blade in a wide, sweeping arc. The final two enemies fell, their armored bodies crashing against the stone floor. Silence followed. Only Nadia's heavy breathing filled the air, echoing through the blood-stained chamber. She turned toward the exit corridor, her body weak, her mind yearning for escape. Then, from the shadows, new figures began to form, phantasmal warriors, their shapes half solid, half ghostly, yet deadly real. They wore the armor of both friend and foe, their faces void of reason or mercy. The only thing that remained within their hollow spirits was war. Seeing her nightmare begin anew, Nadja muttered in despair, "Oh no, not again." War was no stranger to Nadja's clan. Allied with Godfrey since time immemorial, her ancestors had served as the vanguard in countless battles, their greatest victory being the war against the fire giants. It was during that campaign they forged an alliance with the people of Zamor, securing the northern reaches for Queen Marika herself. When Godfrey was exiled, many followed him to the Badlands. Others, however, remained in the north, where their lineage mingled with the astrologers of Liurnia and the scholars of Celia. Generations later, a young Radahn came to Celia, seeking a teacher in the ways of gravity. Nadja, ever curious and ambitious, volunteered to train alongside him and his companions. Her mastery of the sword and the ancient Zamor armor intrigued the son of Radagon and Renala. Over time, the two developed a deep camaraderie. When Radahn built his castle in southern Caelid, he made Nadja one of his trusted commanders. Nadja participates in several battles as a Redmane, honing her skills and reviving the flame of her ancestors, fighting for the glory of her lord. But her greatest ordeal was yet to come. After the shattering millennia heads to Caelid, the greatest war of the era begins. Clean-wrought knights and the Redmanes fighting in the open for the honor of their masters, the commanders ready to sacrifice themselves for their ideals. Caelid becomes a desolate land, the corpses of both sides serving as a landscape to remind everyone of the price of war. And after making a strategic decision, Radahn approves the construction of catacombs to take the dead. He names Nadja to this task, who takes her regiment with her to perform the duty, unaware that this would be the last time she discusses war plans with the general. The war-dead catacombs were created on the northern slope of Redmane Castle. Nadja and her soldiers filled them with enemies and allies fallen in the various locations where confrontations occurred, centralizing the losses of the war in a single location. The arduous work took a long time to conclude, ending close to the war's end. They didn't know, of course. They were inside the catacombs when the great landmark of the confrontation's end happened: the blooming of a demigod. Rot infects all of Caelid, altering the entire ecosystem forever. Sensing that something strange had happened, Nadja barely had time to investigate. When the cursed specters of the dead began warring amongst themselves, and with her soldiers, a brutal fight for survival began. The catacombs became a slaughterhouse, a place of rest and memory, now staged glimpses of a war that had already ended. Regardless of the bravery and skill of her regiment, with no pause for rest and unable to retreat, Nadja's leadership was the only thing that made him sustain for so long. When the first one fell lifeless and his specter rose moments later, Nadja felt true terror and knew that everyone was condemned. Nadja doesn't know how long she stayed in the catacombs, long enough to accept that no one else would enter to save her. Thanks to her expertise on the battlefield, the labyrinthine format of the catacombs, and her mastery over gravity, the commander gathered enough willpower to continue standing. Her survival elevated her senses and powers to unreachable levels. She had accepted that if this were her destiny, she would honor the memory of her family and fight until the end, whatever it might be. Accepting that every face she saw was that of an opponent, every boom was an attack, she couldn't recognize the sound of the gates when they opened. She didn't recognize the steps that entered. And when a beam of light pierced the chests of her enemies, she didn't recognize that there was someone else there, as alive as she was. She continued her fight for survival, only noticing the visitor after the specters had dissipated. Her impulse was to attack, but she was in disbelief. It could only be a mirage, an illusion, but it seemed so real. Then, when the guardian of the earth tree extended his hand and healed her wounds with his golden light, Nadja knew she was safe. Thanks to the divine power of her savior, both managed to escape their confinement. Outside, Caelid was unrecognizable to Nadja, who had no choice but to flee the relentless wrath of her former lord, now reduced to a ravaging corpse devourer. At Redmane Castle, they were welcomed by witch hunter Jaren, an ally, explaining the overwhelming outcome of the conflict against the forces of the Halig tree, sealing the fate of all Caelid and of Radahn. In this moment of discussion, the Guardian introduced himself as Solmer and that he is destined to protect the Earth Tree, seeing the forces capable of corrupting the minor ones. Jaren revealed himself still willing to remain by Radahn's side in order to provide him with a dignified death, but already knew and respected Nadja's decision. After all, she had adapted to the Guardian who saved her life in the catacombs. When both resumed their journey, Jaren bid farewell, feeling lonely but glad for not being the only sane survivor of the Scarlet Rot. After many years of travel, Nadja follows her new lord under a new name, no longer a commander, but the Onyx Blade, for her gravitational powers. At her lord's command, Nadja brings darkness to those who threaten the Earth Tree. Acting as a right hand, blade, and knight, Nadja fulfills her duty with honor. For her, nothing else matters. Once, her ancestors protected Marika's reign. Now, as long as they breathe, she will be at his side and protect the great golden tree, whatever the cost.